welcome to Foster Friday Live. We are so glad you're tuning in with us. I'm here with Mr. LJ, and he is the principal of an elementary school in South Carolina, and we're going to be talking all about kind of how foster parents can advocate for their children in school, how educators can help support children in their classroom. So I'll just give you a minute to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Carlos Littlejohn. I'm the principal of Eleanor Rice Elementary School in Greenwood, South Carolina. This is my 4th year as principal in this building. It's my 19th year overall. I will say that I've thoroughly enjoyed the ride since I've been principal in this building.
That's great. Well, and we are very grateful. This happens to be the school that our kids attend, the school that we're zoned for. So we've had a couple kids come through here, all names that you are very familiar with because they spend a lot of time with you.
Occasionally.
Occasionally. But so talk to us a little bit, and maybe even if you can tell us a story about how can educators, and whether that's a principal, teachers, guidance counselors, how can they support kids in school, specifically children that are in foster care or that have experienced trauma?
Sure. One of the things that we've intentionally done at Rice Elementary School is we take that extra effort to get to know all of our children and our families. I would say that I know roughly 99% of these children. Still trying to get to know the kindergartners. I know about 99% of the children as well as their families. As principal, I intentionally try to get to know all of these children. That way, when there's a situation, when a situation occurs, I can respond accordingly. Everything is situational. You have to deal with things on a case-by-case basis, child-by-child basis, and be able to respond accordingly. And so we tell our teachers all the time, make sure that you form a relationship with these children and their families, because naturally you're here to teach these children, but if you don't know your children, instruction kind of goes out the window anyway.
Well, and especially children who have experienced trauma or in the middle of a big transition, having that relationship makes a difference.
Absolutely.
Because there might be behaviors or experiences that are getting in the way of their learning.
Right.
So let's, in the classroom, like a teacher and a student, they maybe know from the family or they know from the child's records that this child is in foster care. What can they do differently? What can they do to, help this child? There might be things getting in the way of them really learning.
Sure. Again, of course, to me, it's all about forming that relationship. The more you know about a child, the more you can help that particular child. The more you know about a child, the more you can understand where the child is coming from and be able to respond accordingly. For example, one of the things that we talk about incessantly that is not a big deal is homework. Naturally, homework just reinforces what's taught in class, but to me, homework is not that big of a deal. The more the child gets to know in class, the more you teach that child in class, the more you realize, okay, instead of that child doing 20 problems at night, 5's good enough. Just harping on the importance, because once you know and understand where the child is coming from, it'll take you very far with that child. And that child will respond to you accordingly.
Because we've had multiple different teachers. Obviously, teachers have different styles and different amounts of homework or different types of homework. And, when we've talked to teachers and said, gosh, this is just really hard. Like, we're spending hours and hours on this, and it's just, it doesn't seem to be clicking. And then the teachers that say, you just do your best. Like, you do what they can do, and then don't worry about the rest. Like, that has felt so empowering to me as a foster parent to say, okay, it's not about just getting this done. Like, I'm not going to go in and trace the alphabet to pretend like it's the child did it. It's about the kid, like, actually learning. So that,
again, as for Rice, we intentionally tell our teachers to make sure that you get to know your families. Because if you don't know who you serve, you're not going to be able to serve them anyway. To me, that's kind of that's one of my mantras. You've got to know your children before you can teach your children.
That's powerful. So how do you think, or how have you seen, in 19 years, the children that are experiencing or have experienced trauma, or they're going through hardship, or they're struggling with a tough transition, which, going into foster care, being in foster care, that's a tough transition. How does that impact them academically? How does that carry over to what they're doing during the school day?
Sure. A lot of things I've seen carry over from home into the school.
Yeah.
Some children you can readily identify something's wrong. Some you can't because they try to mask it and hide it, but it all comes out anyway in terms of how they perform in school.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's about those relationships. I tell the teachers all the time, if you notice that the child is in peril, so to speak, if you notice a child has come in and he or she's not acting their typical self, ease up, first of all, in terms of like how you respond to that child.
Yeah.
But also, be an outlet for the child.
Yeah.
If the child is going to talk, listen and respond accordingly. If you think it's too much information, let an administrator know. And of course, we'll step in and respond accordingly.
Yeah.
It's all about the relationships.
That's key. That opens up so many doors.
Exactly. And I'm very intentional and very strategic in terms of like the relationships that I form with the teachers.
Yeah.
The children. I always say I deal with 5 sets of personalities.
Yeah.
Teachers, children, parents, district office personnel,
yeah.
and the general community.
Yeah.
And so I'm strategic in terms of how I respond to everybody. But naturally, to me, it's the children first.
Yeah.
And so, again, I tell the teachers, it still takes a village. We're a village. It still takes a village. One of the things that we talked about at the beginning of the year is about that village. We still have to, even though we're not with them 24 hours, while they're with us 7.5, 8 hours, we still have to be that village for these children.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, and these children need so much support, and so having great teachers and great administrators that care about them, that can make all the difference. Whether they're in foster care or not.
Right.
So, as foster parents, we want to serve these children well, and teachers want to serve these children well. So, but sometimes we just don't know. We just don't know what to do. We don't want to. We don't want to be that mom.
Sure.
We don't want to be overbearing, but we don't want to not advocate enough. We want to make sure they're getting the right resources, but sometimes we don't have the full story, so it just feels really confusing. What are some ways that foster parents can collaborate with the education team that's at school, the counselors, the teachers, the administrators, to help these kids? Because like getting that call, that they're in the principal's office again, or getting that note home that behavior disrupted class again, it can just grate at your patience.
Understood. At our school, we have quite a few resources. In addition to administrative team, we've got guidance counselor, we've got a mental health counselor, we've got school psychologists, we've got a gamut of resources here that we advise parents to take advantage of. We have an open door policy. Anytime there's a concern, as you know, anytime there's concern, by all means, please voice that concern, to you, who you believe the right person is. We intentionally try to respond. We're intentional. To me, the buzzword, the key word is intentional. The more we know about a child that's in, that's experiencing trauma or experiencing some type of difficulty, the better we can respond to it and point the parent in the right direction. We're advocates for all the children. We're advocates for the parents as well. And so, again, with that open door policy in this school in particular, we're going to definitely get you in the right direction.
So maybe a school that's not quite as open about all of these resources, or not quite as open door policy, what can a foster parent do? Hey, Jill and Whitney, we're glad you're here. What can a parent do if they're not as familiar with their school? They don't know where to start. What's the best place to start?
Sure. Setting up a conference with a teacher at the beginning is helpful because you'll give that teacher an insight on the child. Just being candid, forthright with the information. And that teacher is going to respond accordingly. At least I believe the teacher should respond accordingly. Even if it means finding additional resources in the building, out of the building, for that family, for that child. Some schools don't have that open door policy. And so I believe starting with the teacher initially and just giving as much information.
Forming that relationship
right,
even.
forming that relationship and giving that teacher as much as he or she needs to be able to respond accordingly to the child.
So let's say, and I haven't experienced this, so I don't know, but I hear this so often. A parent of any kind believes their child needs a resource. That child they're struggling to get that resource or find that resource or even know what that resource is. Whoever they've reached out to kind of has fallen short there. What is a next step for a parent? What should they do to really advocate to get what their child needs?
If the teacher hasn't responded accordingly, I'm one that, of course, I want my students' parents to get with the teacher first and let the teacher do a little bit of, data collection, so to speak, because the data speaks for itself. If that isn't sufficient, if that's not working, talk with the administrator, talk with the principal, talk with the assistant principal, because maybe he or she can kind of guide you in the right direction. And again, I can't speak for other schools, but again, Ms. Lundquist, at Rice, we want you to form that relationship with the teacher first and let the teacher do as much as he or she can at that particular time. And again, if that's not sufficient, take it to the administrator. And it's our diligence. We wouldn't be doing your due diligence if we did not assist you or the child with what what the child needs.
So you mentioned already, guidance counselor, mental health counselor, some of the people resources.
Sure.
Now, what might be some other resources for children that need some additional academic support? So, we hear IEP. Can you tell us about that? Maybe some other resources that exist?
Sure. There are several mechanisms in place. And you mentioned IEP, which is one of them.
And what is that? What is
Individualized Education Program.
Okay, thank you.
There's a series of steps that you have to go through for a child to get an IEP, like testing, data collection, things of that nature. We also have a 504, which is not as stringent as an IEP. You still get accommodations and modifications, but it isn't as, like I said, stringent to a degree as an IEP. Because naturally, the child is crying out for help. We're going to do whatever it takes for that child to get some help. Again, we have the counselors, whether it's the guidance counselor, the mental health counselor. Whatever avenue that we need to go on to make sure the child needs help, we're going to do that. And so, granted, with the IEP and 504, like I said, there's a series of steps. It's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
If a parent has the necessary information from the pediatrician, that's helpful. But you have to realize it's two different diagnoses, because you have the medical diagnosis, but you also have to get the diagnosis from the school.
The academic stamp.
Right.
Whatever.
Right. And so those two will play a part in getting the child the necessary accommodations and modifications to get the child where he or she needs to go.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So as we, have foster parents here, or, people considering foster care, if you had one piece of advice, one thing you could tell a foster parent that's trying to advocate for your kid, what would you tell them?
First and foremost, I would readily say, let the school, from time to time, as an administrator, I've seen from time to time, and there have been cases in which we didn't have enough information about the child. So just lending the school as much information as possible.
Yeah.
So that,
as much as we're allowed.
Right,
and,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So that the child can get the necessary help.
Yeah.
Giving the teacher time to get to know the child as well. Giving the administrators time to know the child as well. I'm a firm believer that once that relationship is formed, and again, I keep talking about relationships, but I'm a firm believer in forming relationships with these children and with the parents. Once that relationship is formed, the more we know, the better off everyone will be with helping that child, because putting that child first is ultimately the key to this entire deal.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
And thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you next week. Bye.